Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I, William Gwynne, will be talking about more of my favourite books of all time. Today I'll be talking about the number 40 spot to the number 31st spot. So we're slowly yet surely getting closer to number 1, but not yet. Today I'll be talking about, as I said, number 40 to number 31. Of course, this is an utterly subjective list, and I even change it around by minute. So yeah, number 40 would probably be number 37 if I recorded it tomorrow. But now I think let's just get into what the video is about. Let's talk about my favourite books of all time. In the number 40 spot, I have Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is an impressive craft, in my opinion. It is historical fantasy set in a Victorian setting, mostly in England. So I believe it begins in 1828. We follow the perspective of Robin Swift, a boy who is taken from Canton at a young age. So he's of Chinese descent, and he is taken to England by a very strange professor called Professor Lavelle, who adopts him. But he's not a father as we would think of it in this day. But yes, this is a really interesting story, which is about colonization, purpose, identity, and the power of language. I think that one of the strengths of this is the themes and how Rebecca F. Kuang writes absolutely beautifully. Her prose is absolutely magnificent. Can I say absolutely again? Absolutely. But yeah, another strong point of this is the friendship, the bonds of friendship which are forged through this. There is a few characters who are thrown into these situations and dangers and evolving plot all together, and they are there for each other. They are all each other have, basically. And I thought it was a really beautiful expression of friendship in this, and I absolutely loved the book as a whole. Very moving. It brought a tear to my eye, which is rare to do in a book, isn't it? It's very hard to evoke that much pure emotion, but I was so invested in this story. Fantastic characters, and I may have a review of this out on the channel already, so if I do, I'll have it pop up, but if not, then keep an eye out, because I will be talking about this very soon on the channel. And yeah, this is just brilliant work of craft. It may be a bit of recency bias for us this high on the list, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be higher over time, because maybe it ages like a fine wine. Maybe, but yeah, that is Babel, and there are so many facets and layers to this book that I absolutely loved, and weeks on from reading it, I can really just appreciate what it is and just dive into it even more. I'm really looking forward to potentially rereading this in the future. Even though I've only just read it, that's what I'm thinking about. You know it's a great book and that you love it when you're already thinking about going through the whole experience again, but with hindsight this time. So yeah, this is a tragic read in many ways, very deep, very philosophical in others, beautifully written with fantastic characters and a really engaging plot. And my number 39 pick is The Women of Troy by Pat Barker. I absolutely loved The Silence of the Gales. You may be seeing it on my list of favourite books at some point. Maybe not today, but you will be seeing it, I assure you. And The Women of Troy, as I said, is the sequel. And I believe there may actually be a third book coming out soon. I was checking Goodreads and I saw a title. So hopefully, fingers crossed, someone isn't just messing me about there. But yes, The Women of Troy I thought was an absolutely brilliant book. It is about the aftermath of the fall of Troy, whilst The Silence of the Gales is about the actual war. This is about the aftermath, about the women of Troy, where they find themselves after the city has fallen, and our main perspective, Briseis, as well. She is an absolutely incredible perspective appearing once again. I cannot say much because of it may spoil parts of book 1, as this is a sequel, but what I can say is Pat Barker brings her really insightful, brilliant prose here, again in a really fluid and smooth manner. It is tragic, it is traumatic, and we get an insight into these characters' lives, which really brings a fresh perspective to characters that I thought it'd be hard to make fresh again after so many Greek retellings are out there, and many that I have read. But I would say The Silence of the Gales is potentially the best Greek retelling out there that I've read anyway. I absolutely loved Circe. I'm sorry, my pronunciations aren't great, but I enjoyed The Silence of the Gales even more, and The Women of Troy is brilliant. Perhaps enjoy the first installment a tiny bit more, but The Women of Troy is also amazing, hence why it is on this list. Anyway, in my opinion, it is fantastic, and there's a great cast of characters, really insightful prose, and it's really tense as well. So yes, definitely recommend this, but read The Silence of the Gales first. In the number 38 spot, I have Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. And before I get any further, actually, I'm just going to show it's got a Papa Gwynne quote on the front. Hopefully the camera actually focuses. But yeah, it's got a Papa Gwynne quote on the front, so how can you not read it when it's got that tick on the front? But yeah, my family absolutely love this. My brother Ed and Papa Gwynne, as I said, loved this, and they said, "Will, you need to read it," in that exact tone. And so I did, and it lived up to my expectations and exceeded them, I'm very happy to say. So this is a fun fantasy adventure with a depth that really took me by surprise. So the premise is that there is a renowned mercenary group called Saga, the most famous in the world, but they have disbanded quite a few years ago. They're aging now. They had some differences, so they separated, but they are having to be brought back together because one of the members' daughters is stuck in a siege, so she's in danger. So he thinks, I need to save her, of course, as a father would, and he needs to go and get the old band back together to try and save her. So this is a brilliant story which is about friendship, camaraderie, moving in different directions, and also about how age changes you and shows what is important in life. So as I said, it is very fun and very witty. Nicholas Ames has some great humour dispersed throughout this. It made me laugh out loud numerous times, and it is a great band of characters that we have here. We've got Clay Cooper, who's the main, I think he's the sole perspective, and he's just a solid, if he was in a music band, he would be the bass player, the solid man who is always there, providing the heart and the core of what is going on whilst everyone else builds around them. But yeah, that is Clay Cooper, fantastic perspective. He is great, and the rest of the group are fantastic as well. I love the dynamic between the different characters, that you see that they really love each other, but they have had differences. A lot has happened in the years since they last saw each other. Some feel betrayed by the others, some don't want to be back in the band, and yeah, so on and so forth. It's really great how Nicholas Ames really balances that with humour, but also a lot of depth as well, where you see that there is a serious nature to where they may be joking or trying to throw off what they're really feeling. So it's got a lot of emotion in that sense as well, as we see these characters combat, seeing each other again and battling with what they've tried to leave in the past. But yeah, it's a really great fantasy romp which plays a bit, it reads a bit like a D&D campaign in some sense. It's got a lot of random magical creatures here, and it's a group of warriors travelling across a land. So yeah, you've got that D&D element, but as I said, with a depth that really surprised me, and it was absolutely fantastic. Nicholas Ames really crafted a brilliant story, and there is a sequel, Bloody Rose, but you can read this as a standalone. I've not read the sequel yet, but this wraps up pretty well, pretty fantastically in my opinion, and it really leads to a climactic ending, which is very satisfying as well, which is always great in a fantasy book. So yeah, that is Kings of the Wild, my number 38 pick. And in the number 37 spot, I have a Booker Prize winner, the 2020 Booker Prize winner to be precise, and that is Shuggie Bain. And this book absolutely, physically and emotionally broke me. But I still recommend reading it because it was a fantastically told story. Broke me in a good way, I guess, but I'm not sure if there can be a good way. But I was that invested and engaged in the story, which shows that there's true craft here. It's really well written, and I felt so engaged in what was unfolding. It is a Bildungsroman about a boy called Shuggie, and the main story is basically the relationship between this boy Shuggie and his mother Agnes, who is a struggling alcoholic. And this is a story that is so heartbreaking, so tragic, but there are moments of joy as well. This shows the full scope of what human life is. There are happy moments, we have joy, we have sadness, we have heartbreak. There is all of that intertwined in this story, which it really encompasses the worst and best that humanity has to offer, the worst and best that we can live as well. We see that there's so much heart and there's so much love between this mother and son, and there are some moments which are really, really powerful, but then there's a lot of trauma in this story as well, and it's another one that brought tears to my eyes, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I cried a lot, especially at the ending of this book. Thought it was absolutely brilliant. So it's set in 1980s England in Glasgow, and so yes, it does bring that kind of Scottish Glaswegian vernacular to the table, but it's still very accessible. You get used to it pretty quickly. Obviously, don't live in Glasgow, so I may not understand some of the words, but you quickly acclimatise to it, and it's pretty obvious what a lot of the language and different vernacular means, so it doesn't throw you off, but it really works to really create this immersive, authentic reading experience, which I absolutely love when an author brings it. It's a perfect balance, isn't it, of not losing your reader in a completely new world and culture, but also bringing that kind of sense of uniqueness and also authentic to what life is in that place or setting. So yeah, that is Shaggy Bane, brilliantly written. Douglas Stewart really fleshes these characters out. They feel real and alive, and that is part of why I absolutely love this book, because they just feel vivid, and it really brings that emotion to a whole new tier, doesn't it, when you feel like you know these characters and that they could be alive. And so yeah, as I said, it is tragic. It is not for the faint of heart. You have to be in a certain frame of mind to read this, but I'd highly recommend it if you feel like you're ready to dive into a book that will break you, but as I said, in a good way. And now on to my number 36 pick, and that is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. So this is the special edition, the folio special edition, and I think their illustrations can sometimes be a bit hit or miss with their illustrations, but with Wolf Hall, I think they struck gold. And I don't mean the pages, I mean the illustrations inside, which are, in my opinion, absolutely fantastic. They really reflect the tone and atmosphere of the story itself with those sketches. But I'm not here to talk about the illustrations. I love them, but I'm here to talk about the content of the book, the characters, what it is about. So I imagine most of you know what Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel is about. It won the Booker Prize, it's been adapted into a television series, and it has been hailed as one of the greatest books of all time. And it is historical fiction at its finest, many would say, and I would agree with that sentiment. This, if you don't know, is about a figure called Thomas Cromwell during the Tudor period. So I believe this begins in the 1520s, or maybe the main story takes place in that time. So Thomas Cromwell rose to be the right-hand man of Henry VIII. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. So yes, he rose to be the right-hand man of Henry VIII, and it is a truly extraordinary tale, not just because he rose through the ranks of society when it was so rigid, the class system back then, but also the events that unfold and what transpires and what we are shown, and the influence and power Thomas Cromwell had. He knows that he could fall from grace at any given moment. I would say that Thomas Cromwell is one of the greatest characters crafted in literature in all time. I know there are bold words, but I think it's totally deserved when it comes to Hilary Mantel's creation of Thomas Cromwell. I was utterly immersed in this book. You really see such a great depth to his life, and you're left to question his motivations. Nothing is told to you explicitly. He can be quite brutal, quite cold, but you really understand from the glimpses of his childhood that you see that it is really about he's struggled so hard to get to the position that he's in, that he will do anything to stay where he is and also help those who he cares about. So you really see that glimpse of humanity, which juxtaposes some of the very cold and lifeless choices that he makes. This is a book of tension, political machinations, and fresh characters who are both vivid and engaging. This was an utterly immersive read, and yes, it is based on true events. I do believe Hilary Mantel took some leniences when it to do with authenticity, but the bedrock of the story is true, and I would like to do some more research to see exactly where the lines are blurred and what is true. But yeah, that is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Absolutely love it, and it is my 36th favourite read of all time. Next up, in the number 35 spot, we're almost halfway through. Wait. We are halfway through the video, and this is The Wolf Den. So my number 35th favourite read of all time. I've done a video reviewing The Wolf Den on the channel, so please do check that out if you're interested, whether you enjoyed this and would like to hear my thoughts, or whether you may be intrigued in reading this. So go check out the review to see if this is a book for you, and also I give a recommendation of what book to read next if you really enjoyed this at the end. In my opinion, anyway, this is absolutely fantastic. So it is historical fiction, but I read a lot of military historical fiction. This is not that, and it is very different from what I usually read, but I absolutely loved it, and I'm really happy I took that dive. I went into it quite blindly. I didn't really know what the story was about, but the premise is this is about a group of slaves who are forced to work in a brothel in Pompeii, I believe in 72 AD, so during the height of the Roman Empire. And so our main and sole perspective is Amara, who is forced to work in this brothel, one of the slaves, and this story is about the relationship with the other women who are forced to work as slaves alongside her. And also there is an element of hope as she tries to get out of this life, because she was not born a slave. She was the daughter of a doctor in Greece, but through events that have transpired, she has found a way to being a slave in this very tragic circumstance. But yes, this is a story which is filled with tragedy, as we see these women with very different backgrounds, see what they go through, what they have gone through, but also it's got a lot of heart, as we see they're there for each other, they're rocks for the others, and I absolutely love that kind of friendship and camaraderie as themes in books in general, but also how Elodie Harper executes it in the Wolf Den. And as I said, there is that element of hope. It's a very tentative hope, which you feel this sense of dread that it could be quashed at any moment, but it also drives you through the story as well. And Amara, I think she's an absolutely brilliant main character, and also the surrounding cast. No one was overlooked here. They all have their own motivations, which you may not find out straight away, and some of them aren't explicitly told, but you just feel that they are real and vivid characters, and everything that unfolds, it feels like it wasn't just for plot's sake. It was actually what the characters would do if they were alive. And Ella D. Harper, this is historical fiction, in my opinion, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'm looking forward to reading the sequel. I've left it a little while because the finale of the trilogy is coming out next year, I believe in the spring, so maybe if I leave it another month, the sequel, and then it won't be too long until the finale, because that wait for the next book is always so hard, isn't it? But yeah, that is The Wolf Den, my 35th favourite read of all time. And as my number 34th favourite book of all time, it is being placed on Let the Right One In. So this is a Swedish book which has been translated, but translated brilliantly, as I'll talk about the prose in a few seconds. But first off, this is a very disturbing vampire story which is very dark. It has a lot of depth and a philosophical lining as well. The question, who are the real monsters? Obviously we've got vampires and that supernatural element, but there are humans in this which are arguably worse. So it's very interesting thinking of that philosophical lining. The vampires, they kill to survive. Humans, a lot of them are just evil, just for evil's sake, but just because that is the way they are. They don't just do it. This isn't a book that just makes people do evil things for no reason, but you see that humanity, the evil side, the depravities of mankind, but you also see some of the heart of it as well, because our main perspective is a young boy called Oscar who is severely bullied by his peers at school, but he meets this girl who only comes out at night, but he starts talking to her. She's never seen a Rubik's Cube, but she knows how to solve it within minutes. So yeah, she's a bit of an enigma to begin with anyway, and this boy Oscar, he really finds solace in spending time with her. And yeah, I won't say much more because part of the brilliance of this book is seeing how it unfolds and the twists and turns, the surprises, and the way it ends as well. One of the greatest endings of any book of all time. If this was a book about the best... If this was a list... Sorry, not a book. If this was a list about the best endings of all time, Let the Right One In would definitely be in the top 10. This is translated brilliantly. The prose is really fluid and smooth and beautiful. I think I need to read the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books, but there's a lot of Swedish books that I hear about that have beautiful prose, and I'm not sure, but maybe it's because the Swedish language translates quite nicely into English, but that'd be interesting to look into. But anyway, whether or not that is the case, Let the Right One In my opinion, really is beautifully written, and the characters are absolutely fantastic. There are two films, a Swedish film and an American film. The American film is directed by the director of The Batman, and I believe his name is Matt Reeves. He's a fantastic director in my opinion, and yeah, it's a great film. I think I prefer the book slightly because there's a bit more depth to the characters, but the film is dark, the book is darker. So yeah, this is not one for those who are not ready for a really dark and brutal read. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart either, but Let the Right One In, absolutely brilliant book, really worth a read. A vampire story with a twist. In the number 33 spot, I have Lancelot by Giles Christian. So I absolutely love Arthurian legend from books, TV shows and films. In my opinion, this is among the finest. I do need to read more Arthurian books. Let me know if you've read any that you think that I should read in the comments below. I need a description, but that would be wrong. But anyway, Lancelot, this is by Giles Christian. It can be read as a standalone, but there is a sequel, Camelot, which you can read if you absolutely love this. But it was originally written as a standalone, so you can really just take this on its own, devour it, absolutely love it, and then yeah, just think about it all the time as I do. So Lancelot, I thought this was really brilliant. Giles Christian is one of the best writers of prose in my opinion. Really lyrical, beautiful writing, but not purple prose. It doesn't detract from the story, it enhances it, it really brings the characters to life, and the setting just feels so vivid as well. After reading Bernard Cornwell's The Warlord Chronicles, I thought I would never like Lancelot again. I thought I would hate him forever. But then Giles Christian proved me wrong. He showed that I can love Lancelot when he's shown in a different light. And as I said with the Trojan retelling earlier, it is the same with the Arthurian retelling, isn't it? The Arthurian characters, it is hard to make them so fresh and vivid. When there are so many retellings out there, it's hard to find a fresh lens. But Giles Christian really does that. He takes it from a different perspective, and telling the story from the perspective of Lancelot was a brilliant idea in my opinion, and yeah, I thought that these characters are really vivid and real and fresh and authentic whilst keeping that heart, the Arthurian legend, the characters as we know them, with some twists and turns along the way. And yes, that we know these the subtext of what is going on, and we just know that there's going to be so much tragedy that occurs. Lancelot, he doesn't have the happiest of stories, especially when it comes to his relationship with Arthur and Guinevere, but yeah, so that is part of what this story is about, of course, but it is also a Bildungsroman, as we see Lancelot from when he's a very young boy and how he grows up, so you really feel this attachment and engagement with him. And yeah, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Giles Christian, first book I've read by him, and since then I think I've read probably 8-9 books by him, and all have been really great in my opinion. This is probably my favourite by him. I had one of his books, Wings of the Storm, in a previous video of my favourites of all time, but yeah, Lancelot is my favourite book by Giles Christian, and my number 33rd favourite read of all time. And in the number 32 spot, my penultimate book that I'm talking about today, it is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This is a brilliant grimdark book which takes the premise, what if the bad guys won? I always say, what if Sauron won and took over the Shire? What would the Shire do? This is a fantastic example of modern fantasy in my opinion, with the majority of the book taking place in a recently conquered city. So we have conflicting factions within a resistance in this city, those trying to quash the resistance and those who are caught in the middle, with a great mix of characters there, all with different motivations and drives and goals. Also those with the same goals but different ways of getting there, and I think it's a really great combination of characters in this book. Some of the best I've had the pleasure to follow, especially in fantasy, and probably every book I've read overall. Mike Shackle's brilliant writer, very fast pace. He always leaves kind of a mini cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. There's always an event that the chapter hooks itself on, not necessarily action on all of them, but something which I felt really invested and engaged in and really made me feel tense. I mean, my heart was physically hammering in my chest as I was reading some of these scenes, and you know when a book affects you that much, when it is just paper in your hands at the end of the day, you know when it does that to you physically, that you are really engaged in this book. And yeah, We Are the Dead, absolutely fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. One of the great books of modern fantasy in my opinion, and also as a debut, wow, how fantastic to write this as a first book. In my opinion, the whole series is brilliant, but I'd say We Are the Dead is my favourite. It's a bit more of an intimate story than the others. I love the others, all 5 stars for me, trilogy of 5 stars, and I cannot wait for what Mike Shackle puts out next. In the number 31 spot, I have Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is book 1 of the Tawny Man trilogy, book 7 of the Realm of the Elderlings. But you can read this after reading the first trilogy with Fitz, which is called the Farseer trilogy. You can skip over Live Ship Traders, but at the risk of being hunted down by all the huge Robin Hobb fans. So don't skip Live Ship Traders. I did on my first time reading them, and it was a terrible decision because since then I've been hearing that Ship of Magic and the Life of Traders are some of the best books of all time. So I will be reading all of the Realm of the Elderlings books and making up for that mistake. But Fool's Errand is one of my favourite books of all time, hence why it's on the list. And yeah, I thought it was absolutely brilliant, returning to characters which we leave at the end of the first trilogy. And quite a few years have passed, but many of the characters are still really suffering with the repercussions of what occurred in the first series. Some of them are shying away, not facing the consequences of what happened. Others have faced them, and it has made them into different people, because that is what age does. I think Robin Hobb does a brilliant job of having these characters that we love and adore, but really adding so much humanity to them as they feel different as they've aged. They're weighed down by their different duties and responsibilities and what has happened in the past, and also the direction of their life has really gone in different ways from what they expected. And so there are characters here which are amongst my favourites of all time. I can't say because it would be spoiling what happened in the first series, so yeah, maybe I will do a spoiler talk about these at some point so I can really dive into it and talk to people about them. But yeah, I'm not the only Robin Hobb fan in the world, by far. There are thousands, and the quote at the front is from George R. R. Martin, and he says, "Fantasy as it ought to be written." I mean, great quote to have on the front of your book, isn't it? But yeah, Fool's Errand really captured me. I thought it did a really good job of having that kind of story carrying on, even though the first series wrapped up so nicely. Beginning a new story with respect to the previous one and having these characters play their role as well. It felt real, vivid, authentic. Robin Hobb is one of the greatest prose writers in my opinion. I saw she wrote on Goodreads, she read a book about the rules of the English language, and she said, read this so that you know how to break the rules and what you're doing when you do that. So she really is she really has studied the English language, and what she does on purpose, and you can tell that it is done with intent, but it's such a fluid and smooth read, absolutely incredible. And Robin Hobb is most likely in my top 3 authors of all time. So there we go, that is my number 40th to 31st favourite reads of all time. Thank you so much to everyone who has stuck around to the end to listen to me hark on and on and on about books, because who wouldn't take a chance to talk about their favourite books? So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Please do let me know if I've caught your attention with any of these books, whether you've read them already or whether there's some similar books that you would recommend. I'd really love to read some books that are in a similar vein to my favourites. But everyone, as I said, thank you so much. I'll have the next video in this series of videos, so talking about my 30th to 21st favourite books of all time. I'll have that out next week. But thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel, and stay safe.